Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 78 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. Now, it's finally happened. I'm covering a Grand Theft Auto game, which I'm very happy to say was very fun to do. So let's start debunking some stuff that's been spreading around online and also maybe teach you a thing or two. Here we go. Let's do this. So, a large portion of what you're going to be seeing in this episode is going to be from North Yankton, and the reason why you're going to be seeing a ton of North Yankton is because it's one of the very few areas of the game that is very linear and controlled. And when things are linear and controlled in any game, you'll oftentimes find some really funky stuff. So the first thing I want to show you is this weird black box underneath the map. What is it doing here? Well, unfortunately, it has to be speculated as to what it does. A lot of times in video games, however, if there are black cubes or black geometry in any part of the game, it's usually used as a trigger or a spawn point. Having this place here can do various things like set up a scene or just simply place the character in the correct spot. Also, when we take the camera outside of the building and start exploring North Yankton, you end up finding a couple of really funny things. If you were to go the opposite direction of where our protagonists start to drive down the road, you can see that the road on the opposite side actually has a static point where the environment has a lower level of detail that does not change depending on where your character is at the given time. Which is actually pretty funny because you can see the exact moment in which you start from Yankton and go straight into Low Poly Town. Also, the town of North Yankton is never meant to be seen by the player, so there's all sorts of low-quality geometry that the developers of Rockstar just put together really quick. Some of the most interesting things would be this texture that represents the very end of the town, which you can see is a very plain textured cutout, with backface culling no less. And one of these buildings has an unused building texture used as the rooftop for another building, which I guess is one way of recycling resources. Also, one of the houses that you're actually supposed to be able to reach has a Christmas tree inside the window. And if we take the camera inside the window, you can see that this Christmas tree is in a 3D plane, but it's not a fully 3D object. It's actually a mirrored 2D texture that is bent into crude geometry. It doesn't even connect to each other, but that would be good enough to convince the player that it's fully 3D. And lastly, before we move on to Los Santos, I wanted to take a look at the alien at the start of the game underneath the bridge. See, I don't really think that this Easter egg is that big of a deal because the aliens are used a lot in Grand Theft Auto 5, so showing you this character model up close doesn't really do anything for any of you, I'm sure of it. But just so you can have peace of mind, you can see that the character is fully modeled, and that there isn't anything underneath him like a spaceship or anything like that. Okay, we're finally in Los Santos. And something kind of odd that you don't see all over the place is here underneath this specific part of the highway, you can see some placeholder textures underneath. And this isn't even in-game underneath the highway. This is actually between the bottom of the highway and the top of it.
That's a 9mm semi-automatic pushed against your skull. Don't look around. Take me where you're going.
So somebody on Twitter asked if Michael is always in the back seat of the car in the mission where Franklin's trying to repossess it. And then immediately after that, someone replied on Twitter by saying, yes, he is. And no, buddy, you're totally wrong. I'm just kidding. Love you. But alright, what exactly is going on here? As you already saw, when we took the camera into the back seat of the car, Michael was not there. The blanket is only there to assure the player that he's supposed to be underneath it. But if we get to that point in the game where Michael starts to spring out of the back seat and point the gun at Franklin, you can see with your own eyes that Michael is called into the scene. In fact, if we slow it down, you can watch the exact frame in which he does pop into the back seat, rather than actually come from underneath the blanket at some point. Also, funny enough, if you don't trigger all those scenes with Michael's kids and his wife, that blanket that you're supposed to see never shows up in the back seat. Let's take the camera inside somebody, or multiple bodies. When we take the camera inside of key characters, for some reason there's a weird texture usually in the torso area. And from what I can gather, it really doesn't have anything to do with the character whatsoever. Like for example, Michael's gardener has a blue texture in his body, but if you look anywhere else on him, he doesn't seem to have anything that resembles something blue. Also, if you take a look inside of the ski masks, you can see that the heads underneath the ski masks are fully modeled. This guy even has hair underneath the ski mask, but there's absolutely no depth to that hair whatsoever. It's just drawn onto a scalp like a tattoo.
Fascinating. You may actually be a rare combination of a sociopath and a deluded psychopath.
Throughout various points in the game, Michael can visit his doctor in this very exclusive office that you can't seem to get to as the normal player. In fact, you can't even get this office to load in the building that it's housed in unless you've just recently had an office visit. But thankfully, if you do have that office visit, the office stays in that zone and you can go inside of it with the free camera. So now with that added ability, let's check out some of the stuff that he's got here. And that hallway that's always used has no proper exit, so you could totally forget about the idea of the player being able to explore this area freely at one point. Now we're gonna do something a little bit tricky here. Now what's awesome about Grand Theft Auto 5, in case you didn't know, is that pretty much every water surface in the game you can swim under or see the bottom of. That is, of course, except for the ocean. See, the game doesn't allow you to swim out too far. And not only that, but your view is also really obstructed, which also serves to make you feel like you're actually under the ocean. And well, moving around the camera doesn't really seem to help with that. So what we gotta do instead is open up a map editor and remove the water layer. Doing this is gonna show you the end of the world in a way, which looks pretty awesome. You get to see the ocean bottom essentially just sink straight down, kind of like how a real ocean would work in some cases. So I had no idea about this. People excited about the episode were telling me about it, and then I had to do a little bit of research. What I came to find out is that a lot of YouTubers like to talk about Michael's house, specifically doors in the house that don't seem to open and doors that don't even exist. So let's just clear all this up really quick. First, there is a door inside the walk-in closet. And while some people state that it's a door that goes out into the balcony itself doesn't have a door on the other side. It would be really convenient to just have that door there so that it would just connect to the house properly, but in this case, it doesn't really seem to do that. The other door is just across the hallway from Michael's daughter, and this door also doesn't really specifically go anywhere. However, there's an open window in the backyard that might suggest that this door was supposed to lead to that spot as well. But if we look inside of this empty room, we can see that there's no door in here either. But this is kind of typical. There's lots of houses in Los Santos that uses this technique of depth, but not really have anything inside of it. And then lastly, there's some really bold claims out there that there's supposed to be a unused room down over by the garage. I just want to clarify that there is no room down there, and that any mods used to create a way down there is not based off of any old data. But while I got your attention, I do want to show you something that's actually kind of cool. If you take the camera through the wall instead of the door, you can see sometimes, just before you move a little too far in, that the rooms are completely empty and have no special effects whatsoever. This is actually really common in open world games because with linear games, the developers get a really good idea of everything that you're going to see, depending on which area you're in at the time. But with open world games, it's a little bit more difficult to manage all the stuff on screen without overtaxing the hardware. So what they do for indoor buildings like this is that they stream in objects based on priority. The actual room that you step in is the most important object that needs to be loaded first, and then when you step a little further in, that's when the smaller objects come into play. It's just that when you take a camera through a wall, you can see it happen in real time. Here's something a little bit creepy to show all your friends. On this really unusual billboard, we have a woman hanging off of a chocolate bar. And of course, that woman is just supposed to be a prop. It's not supposed to be an actual person. And there's two very unusual things to note here. One is that this woman's eyes seem to have pink slits over them, which was a very intentional choice by the developers because underneath those pink slits are dark textures to represent low polygon eyes, as well as seeing those weird pink slits on the inside of the skull. But even more strange than that is that this is just supposed to be a prop, right? Well, when we take the camera inside of the woman's head, there's for some reason a pair of ears back here. Well, alright. Okay, let's talk about UFOs. Now, we all know conspiracies are dumb, but this first UFO here has some very interesting dialogue on the front, of course. It reads, segregate and rearrange, and inside the cockpit is a whole bunch of cool looking circuitry, but more importantly, some very human looking pilots. Funny enough, these pilots do have a texture on them. They're just not a human texture. It's again that texture that read on the ship that said segregate and rearrange. This next UFO actually has an interior to it. The reason why it even has an interior is because there is one scene that I can recall where Michael is abducted by aliens and you end up seeing him go into the ship. Also, not a UFO, but I figure I'd show you this anyway. The tanks in the game have a hatch that the characters can get inside of. Well, if we look inside of that hatch, we can see that the interior is only a little bit of tubing before it just goes into a black box. Now, viewer, I had to make a choice here. I'm going to give you a zoom out of Los Santos, but I couldn't decide which version I was going to go with. I have the actual in-game zoom out. Now, the only problem with this is that I couldn't get rid of the game's fog. So as we zoom further and further out, it's going to get more and more bluey. But if you stick around during the outro, I'll show you how it looks with the map editor. Which means this is my outro, I guess. Thank you very much for watching. If you are a huge Grand Theft Auto fan and it's your first time here at this channel, I recommend you come by another time. I do plan to do the other games in the series since they are all possible, but in the meantime, I definitely recommend you check out these other videos I've done. I think for fans of Grand Theft Auto, my best recommendation would probably be The Last of Us, but I'll leave a couple more options here on the screen or down in the video description for you if you think you might be into something else like Batman Arkham Asylum. But either way, thanks for watching and I'll catch you around. Take care.